We talked about active defense in the last part of this unit. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of this activity. As we're seeing legislation being proposed periodically that would allow companies to take what they call an active defense posture. One such bill was introduced into the House of Representatives on June 13, 2019, H.R. 3270. It was an effort led by Representative Garrett Graves, a Republican from the 6th District in Louisiana. It was similar to a bill that he had proposed in 2017, but this particular instantiation of the bill has bipartisan support. The bill recognizes several basic premises. Cyber fraud and cyber-enabled crime pose a severe threat to the national security and economic viability of the United States. But it's difficult for law enforcement to respond to and prosecute cybercrime on a timely basis. And this leads to a low level of deterrence and a rapidly growing threat because the criminals know that the odds of them being caught are pretty slim. And even if they are caught, prosecution is even more difficult. Cyber criminals have developed new tactics for monetizing the proceeds of their crimes, and that further incentivizes their activity. And there's a general lack of the cyber tools and deterrent methods that defenders can use to protect themselves. And even where those tools may exist, you may find that the defense of a particular company is really dependent upon the approach of the company itself and their ability to spend money and find the talent to protect their operations. And let's face it, victims in the U.S. tend to report crimes to law enforcement if they report them at all. Cyber attacks would be prevented through improved cyber defense practices, enhanced training, stronger passwords, routine updating and patching, and these things really need to be in place before you think of doing anything else, particularly active defense processes, because without having the fundamentals in place, taking additional action really just is a time-consuming process. So Congress determined that the use of active cyber defense techniques, when properly applied, could assist in improving the defenses and deterring crimes. There's an increased interest among the private entities to stem the growth of the dark web in order to return private property, intellectual property that's been stolen from them, and financial records that they may have had the responsibility of protecting. The Department of Justice, however, really needs to clarify what some of the proper protocols are for the entities pursuing active cyber defenses in the dark web. Federal agencies need to prioritize cyber incidents of national significance, and computer defenders should be cautious, very cautious, and not violate the laws of other nations where an attacker's computer may reside. Now, that statement alone implies that you understand what the laws of other nations are. And if you don't, you need legal support to understand what those laws are so that you don't end up violating them and causing yourself more grief than you bargained for. Only qualified active cyber defenders should conduct this practice. Now the question is, what is a qualified active cyber defender? Is that a certified ethical hacker? Is that a person who's practiced cybersecurity activities for a certain number of years? Is it somebody who specializes in firewall technology? What is it that is a qualified active cyber defender, and who determines that? But only a qualified active cyber defender should conduct this practice when there's a high degree of attributional confidence. Extreme caution should be exercised to prevent impacting intermediary computers and creating an escalatory cycle of cyber activity. If you can imagine, if you do not properly protect your identity when you're out there when you're actively defending your system in the dark web or on a intermediary computer or wherever, you could end up creating a blowback where the people start attacking your company specifically, particularly with probably a denial service attack that could devastate your ability to operate. The Act was specifically designed to provide legal certainty, such as clarifying tools and techniques that can be used, and the allowance to exceed the boundaries of your own network. This Act would modify specifically Title 18 of the USC Section 1030, which we looked at much earlier, the CFAA. Section 1030 would not apply to those who use attributional tools, which are programs, code, or command for attributional purposes. Attributional in this case just meaning allowing us to understand who the attacker is, that beacons or returns a location or attributional data in response to a cyber intrusion. Now, the kicker here is the attributional tools must be loaded on your defender's network, on your network, and copied or removed by the attacker. You don't go out and put the material out on their systems. It has to be removed by them. It's important that the tools cannot destroy any data, even the attacker's data, or result in the impairment of the operating system or the attacker's computer. So I think a number of people think when they think of active cyber defense, they're thinking about, well, I can get out there, I'll get access to the attacker's computer, and I'll just blow away his computer, just like they do to us. You can't do that under this law. You also creating a backdoor or providing intrusive access into the attacker's computer system is also forbidden. So again, attributional data is digital information, log files, text strings, timestamps, malware samples, IP addresses, digital artifacts that can be gathered through a forensic process and help identify the location or an additional location if the attacker's using a proxy computer to attack you. So you have an exclusion from prosecution. It's a defense to prosecution that the activity was an active cyber defense measure. It does not prevent a U.S. person or entity who was a target of this activity from seeking civil remedy. So if you can identify the attacker through these attributional activities, you may seek compensatory damages or injunctive relief. Active cyber defense does not include conduct that intentionally destroys or renders inoperable information that does not belong to the victim stored on another person's computer. So you could destroy your data, but you could not destroy any other data that's out there. So for instance, if you're out on a site and you see a lot of credit card data and you can identify that which was stolen from you, you can delete that data, but you can't delete the rest of the data that's out there. Recklessly causes physical injury or financial loss, creates a threat to public health or safety, intentionally exceeds a level of activity required to perform reconnaissance on an intermediary computer, or to determine attribution of the origin. So there it's kind of interesting. You can you cannot exceed the level of activity required to perform reconnaissance on an intermediary computer. So does that mean you can access the computer, but you cannot do anything more to it other than to look through the log files perhaps, or gather some information that may help point you to another computer? But by reference there, it almost seems to allow you to gain access to an intermediary computer, which may certainly be somebody else's computer out on the network, another individual or another company. I would get legal advice before you attempt to access an additional or an intermediary computer. It does not include conduct that intentionally results in persistent disruption of a person's internet connectivity. So you can't figure out where the attacker's computer is and do a denial of service attack on them, for instance. And impacts any government computers involved in the administration of justice, national defense, or national security. So if the intermediary computer happens to be, say, in the NSA, probably don't want to actively engage in any activity on that computer. Notification requirement. The defender must notify the FBI National Cyber Investigation Joint Task Force and receive a response acknowledging receipt of the notification before using the measure. The things that you need to provide to the National Cyber Investigation Joint Task Force is the type of cyber breach that occurred, the intended target of the active cyber defense measure, the steps that you intend to take to preserve evidence of the attacker's criminal cyber intrusion, and the steps to prevent damage to intermediary computers not under ownership of you or the attacker. So again, a proposed law, we'll see if it goes anywhere, but if a law on active cyber defense ever does come into play, make sure that you have legal advice before you engage in anything that can impact an intermediate computer or the attacker's computer.